Welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for checking out today's video. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Sony a6700, which has now been out for almost 6 months. We'll be taking a look at all of its good points, all of its bad points, and everything in between. So let's jump straight into it. Now the first thing you're going to notice about the Sony a6700 is if you've never owned a 6 series Sony camera before, is just how compact it is. But don't let its size fool you, this is a powerhouse of a camera. Now if we take the previous generation Sony a6600 and place it next to the 6700, you might be mistaken into thinking they're both identical, but there is some subtle differences. The Sony a6700 comes with a brand new 26 megapixel sensor, whilst the older a6600 comes with a 24 megapixel sensor. Now one of the big changes is the new flip out screen that comes with the Sony a6700, whilst the previous generations had a flip up screen. Now I had no problems with the older flip up screens, in fact I quite enjoyed them. Where the new Sony a6700's flip out screen feels a little bit more fragile. One negative of the older generation style flip up screens though was the LCD screen was always facing outwards and susceptible to scratches or cracking. With the new Sony a6700 we can either rotate the screen outwards or twist it so it's facing inwards, offering the screen a little bit more protection. Now some of the key layout features of the Sony a6700 in comparison to the older generation is the introduction to this little dial here. This is a quick switch dial between photo mode, video mode and slow and quick mode, and it really is fantastic. On the older generation Sonys you had a single dial to change between all 3 different modes. We also get an additional control wheel which is built into the grip of the Sony a6700, and this is set up to control our aperture. And whilst we're taking a look at this, it's worth me pointing out that I actually find it quite difficult to adjust this control wheel whilst operating the camera single-handedly. It's just a little bit awkward and feels like it's slightly in the wrong position. Another thing to notice on the older generation Sony cameras was the SD card slot which was mounted inside the battery compartment. With the new 6700, the battery compartment only holds the battery and the SD card slot is mounted on the side of the camera. We also have a mic input, USB-C port, a single SD card slot, a HDMI port and a headphone port. Another thing I'm not a big fan of is the adjustment they've made to the on-off switch on the 6700. They've turned the on-off switch 90 degrees clockwise, and now it's a little bit more difficult to turn on than the previous generations. Now the record start and stop button on the 6700 has been moved to the top of the camera, which is a welcome move. On the previous generations it was on the side of the camera and very hard to operate. Now the Sony 6700 comes with the newer Z-type Sony batteries, and these were actually introduced on the Sony a6600. I find that 2 of these batteries will last a whole day of photography, or each battery will last approximately 1 hour 20 minutes for 4K video record time. Now I don't want to turn this video into a comparison video, so let us jump inside the 6700, take a look at some of its best features and what makes this a superb camera. Now before we move on to the next chapter in the Sony a6700, I'm going to be asking a big favour from each and every one of you. Out of all the views that I get on my YouTube channel, only 2% of viewers are actually subscribed to my channel. Now if you're enjoying this video and getting anything at all from it, please consider subscribing to my channel. Not only does this mean that I can see that you're enjoying this type of content and motivates me to make more, but it also means that YouTube will recommend more of my content to you. So that's a win-win for everyone. So make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so you get to see that future content. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is the image quality you can expect from the Sony a6700. Now over the last 6 months I've had the chance to test this out in various locations, and with its 26 megapixel back illuminated sensor, every time I'm blown away. Here are a few examples of my shots that I've managed to take over the last 6 months. Let me know below in the comments which one you like best. Now video quality coming out the Sony a6700, just like the photos, is absolutely amazing. Because it's downsampling from 6K down to 4K, the level of detail is mind-boggling. Now I've done a couple of video tests with different codecs built inside the Sony a6700. I will link them videos below in the top pinned comment. Low level light performance from the camera is exceptional. With its back illuminated 26 megapixel sensor, you're going to have no problems in them low light situations. Now, one of the most common questions asked about the 6700 is, does it overheat in video mode? And the answer to that is dependent on what codec you're using, what bit rate you're recording at, and what frame rate you're recording at. Yes, it does overheat. Now, we can change the internal temperature threshold of the camera from standard to high in our menu system. To give you some idea of the approximate time limitations you can get from the SONY a6700 with the camera setting set to high. If you're recording at the highest bitrate at 4K 120 frames per second, you'll be looking approximately 20 minutes of record time. 4K 60 frames per second, you're looking at approximately 25 minutes of record time, and at 4K 30 frames per second, you're looking at approximately 1 hour of record time. Now, there is one point that I'd like to make about this. If we keep the camera recording at 4K, but lower the frame rates to 30 frames per second or 25 frames per second, and lower the bit rate to around 100 megabits per second, then the camera does not overheat. Now, I will link 2 videos below again so you can watch how to overcome this record limit, so make sure you check them out after watching this video. Now, here's one piece of advice that I'm going to offer everybody that's considering buying the SONY a6700, and it's the first thing that everybody should upgrade, and that is the kit lens. Now, I've made a video of the best 5 lenses you can buy for the SONY a6700. I'll link it above and in the pinned comment below, so make sure you go check that out. But the next thing we're going to take a look at is the incredible auto-focusing system built inside this camera. Let me show you what it can do. Now, this camera comes with the AI auto-focusing chip built inside this camera, and it's just absolutely incredible. Now, it has auto subject recognition, and as you can see here, the auto-focusing system has no problems at all sticking onto the football players. Now, I've done a whole video on the Sony auto-focusing system, which I'm going to link below in the pinned comment and in the description. So if you want to learn the focusing system on the Sony cameras, make sure you check it out after this video. Now, if you're thinking to yourself that previous footage looked a little bit shaky, that is because the Sony stabilization system built into this camera is not the best. For photography, it's absolutely perfect, but when it comes to video mode, don't expect action camera levels of stabilization. Let me give you a couple of demonstrations. Now, inside the camera we have 2 levels of stabilization, standard and active, or we can turn the stabilization off. Now, this video clip here is with the stabilization set to off, and I'm doing a simple pan movement with the camera, trying to keep it as steady as possible. This is exactly the same shot, but we've turned the stabilization on and it's in standard mode. And this time we've turned the stabilization into active mode. And as you can see, you might be able to get away with filming handheld if you're doing simple movements, but if you're intending to walk and film at the same time with a camera, that's a whole different matter. This is me walking with a camera, trying to keep it as steady as possible, but with the stabilization off. This is the same test repeated, but with the stabilization set to standard. And this is exactly the same test, but now we've changed the stabilization to active. And what I thought I'd do is show you the camera mounted onto a gimbal and compare the difference. So if you're looking to introduce movement into your filmmaking, then you will need a gimbal with this camera. So what's my conclusion to all this, and should you consider buying this camera? Well, the level of image quality that you get from the Sony a6700 in photo mode and in video mode is absolutely incredible. The auto-focusing system with its AI chip built into this camera is, in my opinion, the best in any camera system. Again, it gets top marks. The layout of the camera with its back screen, viewfinder and button positions are all perfectly fine. The menu system does take a little while to get used to with so many options and all of its professional features that are built into it. There will be times when you can't find a particular function or setting, but it's not because the menu system is complicated, It's just where Sony have given you so many options and so much depth to their menu. But there is two negatives to this camera. The first being the stabilization, which at best is just okay. It's perfectly fine for photography. In fact, it's actually really good for photography, but when it comes to video mode, it's very underwhelming, and if you're looking for their movement shots, then I recommend a gimbal. Our second negative, and the bigger of the two, is the overheating with certain record settings. And this is a really tricky one to address. You're either in the camp that says it's acceptable, or you're in the second camp that says that no camera released in 2023 should be overheating. Especially when Sony have released cameras in the past that feature these settings, admittedly at a higher price point, but these cameras do not overheat. So you could say that the overheating experience with the Sony a6700 is a built-in restriction, which I must admit doesn't sit too well with me. Is overheating acceptable if the camera's at a cheaper price point? You're going to have to let me know what your thoughts about this are in the comment section below. But does the Sony a6700 get my recommendation? Absolutely yes. It is a superb camera with incredible image quality. Just be aware if you're looking to record an interview whilst walking at 4K 120 frames per second, this might not be the camera for you. And with that being said, I think that's going to wrap up this video. If you've enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up. If you want to see further content like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions about the Sony a6700, please put them below in the comments section. But that's going to be a wrap for this video. Thank you very much for watching. We'll catch up in that next video. See you soon.